you're going to have inconsistency in the strength of the cigar from cigar to cigar, box to box, blend to blend. So in order to avoid that, what I do is I take the plant and I break it into more defined characteristics that I call primings. So when we start picking the tobacco, it's the first priming, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the way to the eighth priming. So when we harvest it, I take the first priming and I put a yellow ribbon on it, so it's the first priming. Second priming, I put an orange ribbon on it, second priming. Third priming, red. So this characteristic goes all the way to the factory. Then what happens is once you define the primings, I say, I want to make a blend. I want the 8th priming from a particular farm in Esteli, Nicaragua. I want the 7th priming from a particular farm in Jamastran, Honduras. I want the 6th priming from a particular farm in Costa Rica. This way, every single cigar has the same leaf from the same part of the plant, of the same fertilization, and the same fermentation. And these leaves, every time we plant the soil, we take soil samples now, and we actually take it to the new science and make sure it's got the right amount of nitrogen, boron, potassium, magnesium. We measure the soil to make sure it's consistent. The only thing that can change is Mother Nature, rain and water. So we have that down to a science. So once that tobacco is harvested, then they take it in the curing barn. In the curing barn, the way it works is they harvest the leaves, you've got this green leaf, and you're trying to dry out all the humidity in the leaf. So they actually take the leaves back to back, stem to stem. They run a sewing needle through it, they hang it in bamboo poles, and they hang it up and fill up the barn. In the old days, they'd have gas-fired heaters. That would be every 10 feet, and they'd fire the heaters during the day, and at night they'd open up the barns. And the leaves would go from a green color to a yellow mutated color to a golden brown color, and it would take 90 days to do that. Now, through modern technology, we literally have air conditioning ducts that run to the bottom and the top of the barn. It digitally controls the temperature and humidity, so it allows us to have a perfect process so it doesn't retain water spots. So you don't get spots on the leaves. The bottom of the tip of the leaf doesn't get black under the gas-fired heaters, so you get a perfectly brown leaf. Then that tobacco goes through fermentation. This is the most important process of taking care of great tobacco. It's the natural biological decomposition of the tobacco. All that rich fertilizer the tobacco absorbed in the farm, the nitrogen, the boron, potassium, and magnesium, you want to bleed that out. Many of you guys have smoked Cuban cigars. With the Cuban cigars, the fact that they don't spend 4 or 5 years bleeding that in fermentation, it retains all that fertilizer. So when it's holding on to fertilizer, the nitrogen, boron, potassium, magnesium, that gives you that ammonia taste. It gives you that sour taste. So when you take a cigar like this and you smoke it down to here, it gets sour, it gets bitter. You'll notice with all my cigars, you can smoke them down to here. They never get harsh, they never get bitter, because we spend a lot of time in the fermentation process. Now, fermentation, you guys have mowed your lawn, thrown the clippings on the side, you see how it starts breaking down? Same thing happens with tobacco. The only thing we add to it is very, very clean water. So you take that tobacco, you put it in piles that are 10 foot long, 5 foot wide, 2,500 pounds of pressure. It's all that weight of the tobacco weighing down on the tobacco. And every 10 days, they rotate the pile, top to bottom, bottom to top, outside in, inside out. When the temperature gets to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, they rotate the pile. And that's what happens. This process takes 4 to 5 years. The higher the priming, the more it takes. So the first, second, third priming might take 2 to 3 years, but the 8th priming might take 4 to 5 years. In the case of Maduros, what Maduros really are the 7th and 8th priming. They're the thickest leaves with the thickest viscosity, with the most flavor, and so they take that extra fermentation, the sugars crystallize, they come to the top, and that's how you get that golden brown color. Most people think Maduros are strong. Maduros are not really strong. What Maduros are is they have a lot of sugar and crystallization, and they should be sweet and caramely, and that's what the Maduro wrapper is. Then after that, the tobacco is then taken and we age it. 4 years, 5 years in the case of our vintage wrappers, 8, 10, and 12 years. That tobacco goes into an aging room, temperature control. I like to keep the tobacco at about 64 degrees so that no bugs break out, but the humidity is up to 74%. And we keep it in 120-pound bales. That's where we keep about $18 million worth of tobacco in specially conditioned rooms. Then when the tobacco is ready to be used, what happens is the following. It goes into the rolling parlor. In the rolling parlor, there's 2 torcedores. One is a buncher, one puts the wrapper on it. This, again, is the most important process in the construction of the cigar. So there's two ways to bunch a cigar. We limit our rollers to making 250 cigars per pair a day. Most factories will roll 500, in the case of Cubans, 700 a day. Here's the problem. When you're bunching a cigar, pretend this is a leaf of tobacco. It's not shaped in a leaf, but this is what you do. You actually take the tobacco and you fold it like this in an accordion fashion, one on top of the other. When you fold it like this, it creates air passages for each leaf, so the cigar can breathe properly. It's like a carburetor. If you don't have the air coming through properly, it's not going to breathe. So you got to take the time to fold one leaf on top of the other and fold it like that. When you're rushing it, you just go like this. That's called booking the tobacco. When you put one leaf on top of the other like this, the cigar's not going to breathe. You're going to have cigars that run sideways on you. Okay, and the cigar gets too hot. So this is an important process. So when they actually bunch it in an accordion fashion like this, put one leaf on top of the other, then you actually get a raw water tobacco, then it goes into a mold. It goes in a mold where they actually put it in a press. Once it goes in a press, you get a perfectly round cigar like this. Once it's round, every single cigar we make goes through a draw test machine. That means there are special machines that we've created that have a vacuum on it, and it actually sucks on it, and it measures the amount of air flowing through it. If it's too light or too tight, we don't allow the wrapper to be put on the cigar. We draw test 100% of every cigar that we make. Most factories, if they have the machines, draw test 1 to 2% of the cigars. It's random testing. We draw test every single cigar. Then after the cigars are made and the wrappers put on it, they actually take the cigar to make sure the cap is evenly distributed. They look at the head of the cigar to make sure that the head is in the middle of the cigar. They actually take and weigh all 50 cigars to make sure they fall within 3 grams of each other. Nothing to do with aesthetics, purely construction. Then at that point, they take the cigars and they go into the quality control room. In the quality control room, they actually check the ring gauge of the cigars. They again check to make sure the head and the cap is perfect. They feel every cigar to make sure there's not a knot in the cigar. Once that is done, then they go into the aging room. In the aging room, they sit for 4 to 8 months. The heavier the priming, in the case of Maduros, they retain a lot of humidity, a lot of water. There's more time needed. If it's the rainy season, because it's raining and there's a lot of humidity in the air, we put extraction machines that extract the humidity. So when the cigars are ready, I like them to be at 11% humidity. That's the perfect ideal condition for a cigar to burn. If the cigar is too high in humidity, then it's like a carburetor again, too much moisture, it starts heating up, it gets wet, it gets sour, it gets bitter. If it's too dry, it gets too earthy, the cigar can break. So we like it at 11% humidity, that's when the cigars are right. Now when they're ready to be packed, now they're checking the aesthetic quality. Being a natural product, there's a lot of gradations of color. I have a very strict standard on what the color of the cigar ought to be. If it's lighter or darker than the standard I've set, it becomes a factory select. You see we sell factory selects here. Perfect to smoke, perfect in taste, there's no difference in anything, only the difference in the gradation of the color. If the cigar has some spots on it, if you see too many veins on it, it becomes a factory second. So 37% of our cigars are rejected as factory selects and factory seconds. Perfect to smoke, perfect in taste, only because they don't fit the tight standard I have. And the reason I have the tight standard, if you look at all my cigars, they look like chocolate bars. They look perfect. It's because I want to make sure that when somebody buys 8 or 10 cigars out of a box and a retailer opens a new box to fill it, it doesn't look like a difference in color. So you'll notice with all our colors, they're always perfect. So this is one out of the 300 steps that we have in quality control. And we take 2,000 people a year down to our factory to show them this, because I can talk to them blue in the face. And when they see it firsthand, they really understand. And we take them to other factories also, so they don't think that every factory works like our factory. So they can compare apples to oranges and they can see the difference. So we work very, very hard in preserving the consistency, making sure the cigars have character, they have a lot of flavor, they perfectly draw, and so it's a lot of work, it's a labor of love, it's an art form, it's a passion, and that's what we work for. So, wow.